So, hello and welcome to Cyber Sidekicks, the weekly cybersecurity podcast hosted by Richmond Advisory Group's principal analysts, namely me, Rory Duncan.
And me, Christina Richmond. This podcast is your go-to partner for understanding the cybersecurity market, industry trends, and the real-world challenges of protecting organizations today. Hello, Rory.
Hey, Christina. As we were saying in the pre-show, I'm just really pleased that you're sounding so much better. I know you're on the mend. You're not 100% yet at all, but very pleased to hear your voice and hear that you're, improving on a daily basis.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a journey. And for all of you out there who have gotten the winter crud, just a generic cold that, stuck in some folks' chests, it's no fun. And I hope you're mending as well. And I'm almost through it. So thanks for your patience with me last week, Rory. My voice was quite weak. And I appreciate the listeners kind of, giving me a pass on the strength of my voice last week.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's quite something when you're floored like that. And I'm pleased it didn't get worse than it did, but it was pretty bad. So glad that we could do that this week. And in fact, as a kind of a segue into the next thing, this is our 8th episode, Christina.
I can't believe it. I know. I can't believe it. It's crazy.
Well, and here's the thing. I'm just sharing with the listeners some statistics that I looked at that now that we're on our 8th episode, we are actually in a minority of the podcast environment out there, in as much as only 48% of all podcasts make it to their 8th episode. Yeah, in other words, less than half of all podcast shows, most that start, will then have stopped by their 8th episode. And in fact, if you look further, and this is using data from Rephonic, that only 8% of podcast channels reach 50 episodes, and only 4% reach 100 episodes. So we're actually in a situation where there's a very small number of podcasts that continue to be active beyond their 8th episode. So just to reassure everybody who, of course, can't possibly function without this every week, that we plan to continue. And thanks to you all for listening in. Thanks for your support and encouragement. And also thanks to all the interesting guests we've had on the show. We've got many more planned over the coming weeks and months. The other thing was, I wanted to add, hold the front page. We also have 2 5-star reviews. So thank you so much to whoever you are, because I can't track down which streaming service it was on, but it does mean a lot to us and helps keep us motivated. So thank you.
That is so amazing, Rory.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yes,
isn't it?
Thank you so much. We're learning as we go, folks, and we really do mean it when we ask you to let us know what you'd like to hear about and what you'd like more of or less of. And if you know someone you'd like to have as a guest on the show, or if you think you'd like to be a guest, please do reach out. There's a comment function on the website, and we'd love to hear from you. And please do, help us improve, because we want to be here, first of all, to be educational and helpful, to be your sidekick. And secondly, to have fun and talk about a market that we love. And thirdly, to, get to know you, the listener, and to help further whatever is important to you. So yes, wow, 5-star reviews. Thank you so much.
Yes. And of course, just to add to what you're saying, which are all, very important points. Fourthly, it's to get sponsorship. So for those of you who may be thinking of opening your wallet and wanting to sponsor us, we won't say no. However, we can always have an offline conversation about that. I think we do accept credit cards, maybe not crypto. Mind you, given the current situation, probably not such a good idea.
Not such a good idea. And we're figuring out the sponsorship thing. So hit us up, help us figure it out if you're interested. And yes, we do accept credit card. Isn't that a funny thing? Yes, Indeed.
Excellent. Before we do the news, I just wanted to say, Christina, I just had a quick show report for those of you who didn't listen to last week's episode. I was at the Cloud and Cybersecurity Expo in London. And those of you who don't know that show, it's a big co-located event held at the XL Exhibition Centre in the east of London, next to the Thames River. So the show itself includes various sections, which are in fact color-coded by carpet on the floor of the show. So it's like,
Really?
so when you get into, the carpet's turned green, why are there pipes and cables and things around? That's because you have strayed into data center world. So that's the key there. But it was quite interesting to see that the cybersecurity section was quite a decent size, plenty of companies exhibiting and folks to chat with. And a quick roundup, I met with a bunch of different exhibitors, vendors, and service providers. So shout out to NetSpy, Control Plane, Cyberhaven, Dark Invader, Satori Cyber, Eclipsis, Horizon 3, Asset, and many others. And it was kind of a mix of global players, as you can hear from that list, but also for those of you on the North America side, others you might not recognize because they tend to be focused on Europe. Some of the topics that were discussed, there was quite a lot of talk about cyber defense, and that's from a public sector and government perspective. And it kind of illustrates the way that the advanced persistent threats that those particular industries and bodies face are kind of permeating more into larger parts of the private sector. So there was an increased awareness of that. Some of the vendors and service providers who provide those kind of nation-state level protections are looking to bring that into the private sector. The second thing, which shouldn't come as a surprise, because the show took place in Europe, plenty of offerings on display for security governance and regulatory compliance, including the new ISO 42001, which is the new ISO compliance for AI. That was really interesting to have a look at that. When something gets an ISO in the context of technology and cybersecurity, it's pretty belt and braces when it comes to how to define it and how to audit. And then the last point I wanted to make, and we can probably talk to them in the coming weeks, is I spoke with a company called Eclipsis. So they're UK-based. They specialize in encryption as a service. And one of the things that they were showing was their post-quantum encryption technologies. So I interviewed a few of these firms to get their take on what's happening in the cybersecurity market. And I'll maybe cut in the recording that we do to a couple of clips from audio clips. So if you are interested in that, hang on at the end and I'll do some clips for you.
No, I think that's great. I think some of these are really interesting. The new ISO 42001, that's going to be very interesting to take a look at. I have not yet. I heard it was coming or had come, but I have not taken a look at it. And I wonder if our guest today will have a thought on it. We'll ask him.
Yeah, we will.
But yeah, and then the post-quantum encryption. Let me just say here, folks, you do need to start paying attention to post-quantum encryption. And it may seem like it's really far out in the future. There's some regulatory control that has been saying we need to take care of it by X date. I don't remember, 2026 or what have you. But it's because they know that we will be able to break the current encryption we have when we have quantum compute a little bit further along. And we need to back up from that date, even if that date of breaking the encryption is 10 years from now. You need to back up enough years to get your systems in order, to be ready to have some of the new post-quantum encryption ready to go. And there are companies like Eclipsis, HPI, IBM, there are others working on this problem that are giving us this new algorithm to use for cryptography. And you need to start thinking about it now in terms of your systems being able to handle it. Because if you wait until quantum is here, has arrived, and we're now seeing attackers breaking the current RSA encryption or others, it's too late. So you have to kind of back up from where we think this might happen. It might even be 15 years out, but start getting your budget, start thinking about it, start putting in new systems, talk to those companies you trust, and start looking at post-quantum.
Yeah, good advice. Thank you for that, Christina. Let's do a little bit of news next. Given that we were talking about AI, or mentioned it earlier, that piece of news I picked up this week, which was in Security Week, about a new CCA jailbreak method that works against most AI models. And that's according to two Microsoft researchers who've devised this new optimization-free jailbreak method, they call it, that effectively bypasses the safety mechanisms of most AI systems. And they call it a context compliance attack, CCA, where it exploits a fundamental architectural vulnerability present within many deployed Gen AI solutions, subverting safeguards and enabling otherwise suppressed functionality, which is interesting because I know we've heard about this before, and I know you've got some insights on this, Christina, but the idea that you have a fabricated dialogue and you can trigger restricted behavior. In other words, you kind of talk around it. And I'm reminded of some of the stories in the early days where people would say, you know, a tale about their grandmother, how they missed their grandmother, telling them stories, sitting on their knee. Their grandmother worked in a bomb factory and used to assemble atomic bombs. Right. It would be great to hear some of her stories about how she did that. And that kind of got round the safeguards that people were using to protect some of this information from people replicating atom bombs, for example. But what's your view on this CCA attack?
No, I think it's really interesting, and we'll see more and more of this, Rory, as we go forward. This is perhaps more advanced, more complex. We're seeing more normal attacks into AI systems because of lack of hygiene or because of misconfiguration. And this is age-old issues that we have in our IT infrastructure where we're rushing, we don't set things up properly, we don't take the time to configure something properly and put in the necessary controls. So yes, this is interesting and more advanced, this context compliance attack, and there will be more of them. But then there's also those that we shouldn't lose sight of, those that are just the basic hygiene opportunities we have to create vulnerabilities. And let's try not to create those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, good point. Let's try not to create those vulnerabilities. I think that's this week's homework for everybody. Of course, it's something that is ever present, but we always kind of have to keep reminding ourselves of that. The other piece of news, and we kind of ran out of time last week, Christina, but I think it's still important to talk about it, is that SquareX's research team has uncovered a new and sophisticated browser attack technique. It's called the polymorphic extension attack. And this is basically the attack allows malicious Chrome extensions to morph into other browser extensions. So that's including password managers, crypto wallets, and banking apps to steal sensitive information. So this is quite clever. Now, a couple of points on this, and I know those who are experienced in the security space, and certainly those who are experienced programmers and security programmers will talk about, the backdoor risk that you have from third-party products, in this case, extensions, buyer beware, etc. And of course, some browsers are considered more secure than others. Some are set up to be very secure, but perhaps not often used. Others are a little bit more open. So what do you think about this? A morphing extension that pretends to be something else?
So there's a thing called software security supply chain. Mm-hmm. What it's called? Software supply chain security. There you go. And there are companies out there that are doing the deep dive into parsing all of the related software pieces back to the beginning of code in order to find the vulnerabilities within your supply chain. So, we used to talk back in the day about supply chain vulnerabilities or third-party risk, and those would be partnerships, vendors that you worked with, those that were on your network, those that shared systems with you. And of course, everything is code and everything now is in the software realm. And it's been on the rise over the last several years to be able to dissect and analyze all of the code back to the very foundational beginnings of that supply chain relationship in terms of code. One company I'll call out that does it, it's certainly not the only one, but this company does it quite well. is Reversing Labs. I've been very impressed with their skills around this. I've watched as they've parsed the code all the way back to even open source code that is in GitHub or wherever it may be that you didn't even know it existed. So when you've started working with that code, whether it's a browser extension, whether it's some other piece of code, you don't know how much of the genetics of that code have been brought forward into the future from a decade ago that may have a vulnerability. So companies like Reversing Labs can go into the analysis of that code all the way back to that first occurrence in many, many cases and find the vulnerability. So I think what I take away from this is, oh God, here we go. Another thing I need to worry about in my paranoia with all of the things that I set up in my own life, like a password manager, right?
Yeah.
Right. But also a shout out to the listeners. If you are in any of the industries that are very predicated on a lot of code interaction with other suppliers, especially those that are highly regulated, get thee to a company that can do this analysis for you quickly, because this new polymorphic attack on Chrome is just yet another one of these things that is a warning beacon that we have to pay attention to. So that's where I go from this news.
Yeah, that's fine. And it's slightly depressing in as much as it's a case of something else to add to the list, a kind of never-ending list of things to be aware of and to mitigate against. But of course, we'll be better at identifying it. It's still something else to do that we have to
Something else to do. It's never ending. And, that's sort of the whole thing with cybersecurity is if it's not something new and whiz-bang, right, like this new AI CCA attack or this polymorphic attack on Chrome extensions, it'll be yet again something else that will be new. But then there's always the old, tried and true, yawner things that we have to pay attention to in cyber as well, like the hygiene and the configuration. So it's an interesting market for sure.
Yeah. Well, to quote or misquote The Simpsons, cybersecurity is like the cleaning of a house. It never ends. Yes.
Yeah.
So this week's guest is Josh Ray, founder and CEO of Blackwire Labs. Welcome, Josh.
Sure. Thanks, Rory. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you, Christina.
Oh, we're super excited you're here. Yeah, super excited to have you on. And Josh and I go back a bit. Gosh, I think we met when you were at Accenture. Were you ex-iDefense? Is that what I'm remembering?
That's correct. Yeah, I came over as part of the acquisition of iDefense. So I was the general manager at that time, and my good friend and mentor and one of our strategic advisors right now, Matt DeVoe, actually, and Tom Parker, who were with Fusion X at the time at Accenture, did the acquisition to bring me over. So that was an amazing experience and have a lot of fond memories of all the folks there. Just a great mission.
That's awesome. Well, we're so glad you're with us today. And, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're doing today. I know you're off on your own. You've started your own venture. So tell us a little bit about Blackwire Labs and what your mission is now. I know you're a very mission-driven person, and I love hearing you talk about this industry because you come at it with such passion, kind of servant leadership, which I really appreciate as well. So what are you up to now, Josh, and what kind of mission are you focused on?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And the team and I really are focused on how we can help organizations, especially in that Fortune 500 to 5,000, scale their capabilities more effectively. There's been this notion of this cybersecurity poverty line that's existed for at least the last 2 decades, probably longer. And there's probably some debate out there whether, there's a skill shortage of not. But the fact of the matter remains is that there's a lot of organizations that are out there that are facing, massive types of regulatory compliance, threat activity. that just don't have the necessary skills and expertise and resources that they need to do their jobs effectively and accomplish their own internal organizational missions. So, we thought, based on our experience in serving the Fortune 1000, essentially, throughout the courses of our collective careers, and many of us have intelligence community and DoD roots, we wanted to really kind of leave the industry in potentially a better place than we found it, and really focus in on, that particular market segment, especially like state and local organizations, to see if we can really kind of democratize this notion of cybersecurity skills and expertise and bring that to them at scale. And that's really what we've set out to do.
That's very cool. And you're using AI models. You're bringing information on policy and standards and regulatory information to those who are practitioners and those who are consultants, and helping them sort of weed through the morass of data there and assisting them with Gen AI, allow them to find the insights quickly and to get the recommendations from the tool so that they can do their jobs more efficiently. And then you're also helping on the security operations side.
Yeah, that's actually a really good explanation, Christina. I'm going to have to sign you up before.
Oh, wow. That's amazing that I actually got it right. You never know, right?
Yeah, no, that was pretty spot on. We talk about what we do. In a sense, we're offering services delivered through the scale of AI and through a platform. When we think about, when we talk to clients or design partners or other consultant organizations, we talk about like interviewing Blackwire rather than, putting it on a trial. Because we really do feel like it's that coach that kind of stands, over your shoulder and really helps not only address, individual specific use cases. You don't bring Blackwire into your organization specifically for, say, just the SOC or just the compliance or readiness types of things. And it does a good job across all those different use cases. But really the value is bringing it in truly as that force multiplier, because it's cross-discipline and it allows you to kind of very much address multiple stakeholders within your organization. So think about it as you would hire an employee or you would bring a consultant to do, one or two very specific types of things. Now you're able to bring in a capability to your organization that can walk across all the different disciplines within security and also address stakeholders, whether they be senior executives in your organizations down to your, most technical security engineers. And we spent a lot of time on curating a knowledge base. So it's a RAG implementation. We've spent a lot of effort building a cybersecurity community of experts to help us take that human approach to validate our knowledge base, to ensure that, we've got the right coverage across different industries and different types of threat and vulnerability areas, but also to use that as a collaboration point and bring their collective wisdom in through direct interviews and transcribing those interviews and training the model on that, specific wisdom. So it's not just an open source data set that's, highly vetted through a source criteria, but it's also bringing in kind of that direct industry expertise that really brings that human effect to the training of the model as well too. So, and then we also have created a technology called TrustWire, which is using the blockchain to instantiate the source validity and as well as the auditability and security of those sources, so that when you get an answer from our platform Blackwire AI, that not only is it fully referenceable and has all the sources, that those sources have both been vetted and are secure cryptographically as well too. So our clients really like that approach and really like the fact that when they ask a question, and in some instances it's outside of the knowledge base because we've dialed down the creativity, quite a bit, it tells them, hey, we don't know, and it cues us to do some additional research and collection.
Well, that's great. So before we started recording, you were starting to talk about just Gen AI in general and the usage of it and the state of that part of our industry in cybersecurity. And because you're in it every day and working with clients every day around your daily mission. Where do you think we are with Gen AI? Where do you think we are in the evolution and the adoption and the reality of it, maybe even the attackability of it? Because one of our news pieces this morning was about, help me, Rory, it was CCA, and I don't have my notes open. Yeah.
It was that CCA attack, Josh. It was the two Microsoft researchers. They devised a new optimization-free jailbreak method that can bypass the safety mechanisms of most AI systems by manipulating the conversation history. There's always going to be things like that. We've covered other concerns of, the use of Gen AI. What's your approach to this?
Yeah, so, the analogy I like to use is kind of twofold. One is we are very much, I think, at the infancy of, even though Gen AI is commercially relatively new, obviously AI, machine learning has been around for a while, but for folks that are using it on a day-to-day basis, I think that most folks are still kind of using just regular LLMs as kind of a churched up search engine. I think is probably the best way to say it. And they haven't really fully grasped the power of being able to use it, not only in their everyday life, but then how do I actually think about applying that to not only the things that I do within my day job as a security practitioner, but then how can I actually expand my ability to ask other types of questions? Those are the things that I think the industry is still trying to wrap their heads around, as far as, yes, this is great. I have to create some very nuanced types of prompts, or maybe there's some existing workflows out there. But it's really kind of relearning in a lot of respects how to do their jobs potentially a different way. And the things that they did before, maybe they don't have to spend as much time on it. Creativity, I think, is going to come back in a very big way. Thinking about how to solve kind of order of magnitude types of problems with this type of capability is very much an attainable thing. And it's really not so much, I come into work every day and I do these 15 different tasks and I'm hammering on the keyboard to do it. How do I actually then leverage these different types of tools to do some of these things on my behalf, so I can actually use kind of my God-given human brain to think more creatively about what is it, the outcome that I'm actually trying to drive, for the organization. And I think when folks are a little bit worried about AI adoption, aside from the security risks, as far as how that's going to impact my job, I think that people should really be excited about it, because, if you're an expert in your field and what good looks like, what good output looks like, and what are the right types of questions to ask, and how do I go about really kind of breaking down a problem to achieve an outcome? I mean, something like a Gen AI type of capability is really, in many instances, how you're going to be able to flourish potentially in the latter parts of your career, because it's an enabler, far beyond anything that we've seen before.
I love that. Oh, sorry, Rory.
No, I was just going to ask, Josh, we talk a lot about Gen AI in the show, and we kind of oscillate backwards and forwards, but that wasn't the question. I think how you've described it is an interesting analogy. It's a very useful tool. If you're good at something, it can enhance your use of those skills. I think perhaps conversely, if you're not, it might not be the solution to the issue at question. The reason I mention that is because, I was around, back in the 90s when this desktop publishing revolution happened. Remember that? You could do a newsletter on your computer and print it out. And for designers, typesetters, for people who were creating these things, it was great. Suddenly you could digitize the publishing process and do so much more quickly and much more accurately, and revise and so on. But it also spawned homemade and home publishing, which, produced a lot of content, but a lot of it was just complete trash, or so awful and badly designed and badly written that it perhaps wasn't worth it in the first place. Perhaps that's part of the democratization of publishing through that, but perhaps the same could be said for the democratization of content generation using Gen AI. If you are good at it and you know what you're doing, it can be a very useful tool. If you don't, it can be perhaps not so good and potentially dangerous. I don't know.
Yeah,
well, and also,
that's good.
I also
Sorry,
just will add one. Yeah, I'll just add one thought to that, which is there's talk of not losing your job because of AI, but becoming a master of AI. We still need that human interaction, as you've said, Josh, and how you do that with your experts that create Trustwire around Blackwire. And it's becoming the manager of and the expert around LLMs that I think is a newer role that will emerge, that will people will step into and become the overlay of the LLMs. What do you think about that as well?
Yeah, I think in the future state, the managers of the future, the ones that are good leaders are going to have a mixture of kind of humans and agents that they're going to have to be able to orchestrate effectively. And, just like any other technology, we've got to be able to understand it. Rory, you talked about the early days of, desktop publishing. And I kind of liken this to the early days of SIM in some respects, right? So back in the day, you would have the security engineer that had their, set of tools that they would use for log parsing and detection and, even some early, orchestration. And when the first SIM vendors came out, those security engineers were like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of what I do. And, they would side by side, they would run the use cases of whatever SIM it was and run their scripts and be checking these things one-to-one. And eventually, they would find outliers and they would say, hey, your SIM didn't detect this. And the SIM vendor with their, array of developers and researchers go back and fix it at order of magnitude faster than the individual security engineer could do it. And over time, right, the SIM space kind of took over that individual kind of script writing detection, capability. And I'm sure it exists in some form or fashion in some organizations. But, the fact of the matter is that was then productized and it was, created as an industry. And then, those folks that were doing that work before started doing more things around orchestration or started to kind of elevate their own skill sets to think about, okay, what are the more of the operational things I need to be thinking about and how do I drive, this across, the incident response or threat hunting flow. And then the SOAR revolution, came out and started doing a lot of those things. So I think we're always going to find ways to continuously look for opportunities to automate. That's just how humans operate. And some of the best coders that you find out there are just, by their own admittance, inherently lazy, right? Because they want to figure out a way to automate as many things as they can. But they do that from a space of expertise. And then, those folks typically go to work for product vendors and they take that expertise and as former practitioners, they bake it in there. So I think what we're seeing is kind of the natural evolution of even say like services-based consulting as we're looked at, right? Like, so what we're providing in through Blackwire, our services, our specific recommendations, whether it's helping a board understand risk more effectively or helping a security engineer write better signatures or faster signatures. But I think, Christina, to your point, it's not just about being able to do things better, faster in your own kind of area of expertise with a degree of, trust, but it's also allowing those folks to kind of branch out to those tertiary areas of discipline, which they might not be as good at. I mean, in security, we're all pretty much, have one or two areas of expertise, and allowing them to understand potentially some of the operational or strategic impacts of the things that they're doing so that they can not only lessen the burden of maybe their team around them, but also provide a more holistic approach to, what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
And I love what you said, Josh, about the creativity. I've gone to the place of this fear of losing your job, but oh no, if you actually have expertise and you know how to work with the LLM to be able to take out of it what you need and make your role better as a manager, orchestrator, and then, yes, as you said, we keep progressing, and then we'll get some kind of SOAR capability around AI, right, eventually. And maybe that's what you're creating also, is that orchestration layer. And I want to dig into that with you at some point in the future. But also the creativity. And that was an aha for me. So that's my takeaway for today, is that we've got this new ability to interface with the LLMs to make ourselves faster, of course, and more efficient, of course, but also as we really learn how to engage with these tools to become more creative in solving the issues we have in cybersecurity. That's just a great takeaway. Any last notes for us?
I think that this is just a fantastic show, Christina. I think what you and Rory are doing and bringing in, just different perspectives from the industry is fantastic. And, I'm just grateful that, that you hit me up for the opportunity to say a little bit about, an industry that's really given me a lot. And, we truly want to be able to provide something that's useful and that's trustworthy for the community, and help folks out however we can.
Well, thank you, Josh, because, we always want to have interesting folk on. So thanks for coming on. We appreciate that, and for sharing your experiences.
It's my pleasure.
Josh made a few interesting comments on the kind of after show chat that we have once we've done the recording. And, we were all in fact reflecting on the fact that when it comes to Gen AI, there is a point at which, regardless of how good any of the models are or what the prompts are, that at the end of the day, it will come down to human creativity producing new content from which we can all learn from, including the public models, but also the quality of human intervention to make sense of some of the more complex aspects of automation and so on. I think that's one of the things, Christina.
And I think the point he made, yes, absolutely what you just said, is also that humans will be the differentiators in the models, because AIs don't create content, right? They just take the content that's out there, yes, huge amounts of content, and help us make sense of it and rationalize it and also make recommendations based on it. But it is the generation of new, creative, human insight that will further power and enable these LLMs to become better. And it's such a brilliant point, Josh was leaving us, to bring that up. So don't despair, folks. We have very much a big role to play in AI, and we will be the differentiators.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And, maybe I feel a bit more positive, Christina, about, our futures. Our futures, so when the deep research or whatever the next iteration of OpenAI will throw at us, which replaces, analysts and researchers and so on, we can be the masters of whatever particular area that we'd like to be, because we're providing that human input. I certainly do not want to end my working days as a prompt engineer, for example. I don't think I could stand that. However, having some kind of collation of material or archiving of things or whatever it happens to be, getting the most out of the information that can be used to generate some additional insights is, perhaps one of the ways to go. Yeah, that was a great chat with Josh. Really interesting. So thanks for that, Christina. I just wanted to come up for the second last thing we'll be doing before we close out. In fact, the last thing we'll do before we close out is a quick RSA update. And again, for those of you who have been living under a rock, or if this is your first time listening to us, we will be at RSAC 2025, which is April 28th to May the 1st at the Moscone Center in San Francisco. So reach out if you'd like to meet us. Thanks to all of you who have already done so. And our calendar is filling up, Christina.
It is. We've got meetings so far with Veracode, IBM, OpenText, Fortra. Who else? I'm just looking. Expel, Sophos, Trustwave. And so we're still booking additional meetings. We've got some spaces left. And what we do with these meetings, just to sort of educate our listeners, is we listen. It's really only a half an hour meeting. It's a meet and greet. It's a, hey, tell us what's new and how you're doing and how the business is going. Not a formal briefing or presentation, because, I used to have formal briefings at RSA and they're exhausting for all involved. It's really just the human experience. And then we also walk the show floor, get to know some of the newer startups and see what the big guys are doing as well. And then at the end of all of this, we write up a nice little summary of who we talked to, what we learned, what's going on, and we'll put it on our website and on LinkedIn. And so, whether you're there or not, you might want to take a look at what we write just to kind of get some insights, learn about some new companies. If you can meet with us, please do. Once the bulk of the schedule is booked, I start backing up into breakfast, and I also book second breakfast. If needed, maybe an early coffee before first breakfast or second breakfast. And then I introduced a new meeting event for Rory, which is second happy hour.
Whoa. Yeah.
So reach out. Yeah.
Yeah. Second happy hour is definitely just a listening one from my side.
Oh, me too.
You won't get much conversation, but second happy hour. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, thanks for that, Christina. We look forward to that. Gosh, it's coming up as well. Where are we now? In the kind of middle of March. So we've only got about, 6 weeks until the event?
That's right. 6 weeks. We'll see you there.
So thanks, Christina. That's the end of this episode. That's episode 8 of Cyber Sidekicks. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thanks for your continued support. Please let us know what you'd like to see in coming episodes and leave a review for us on your streaming platform of choice. And we look forward to speaking with you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks again, folks.